Your voice counts. Your questions are answered. This is Observer AM.
16 minutes after 7 o'clock in Antigua, Barbuda. This is Observer AM, Daren Matthew-Ward in your company. And on the eve of Budget Day, we are going to be taking a look at the budget process and also its impact on the lives of everyday citizens and perhaps a few things in between. I'm sure a few things in between. Joining us for this discussion is economist and business consultant Petra Williams, who has offered to grace us with her presence in studio, which comes as a surprise.
He dragged me out of bed.
I drove you out of your bed?
Yeah,
Petra?
if I go and get up on phone. Anyways, morning everyone, morning Antigua Barbuda, morning Daren. It's a beautiful day, isn't it?
It is a beautiful day.
Yes.
And lovely showers. All right, the technical director is telling me I need to do something in studio. So let's start with the first question before he puts on the camera so that everybody can see who Petra Williams is, just in case they are in any doubt.
They don't need to see
They don't need to see. Every year we go through this exercise of the Minister of Finance presenting a budget statement. Beginning of the year, setting the tone financially. How critical and how impactful is a budget speech as far as our national development process is concerned? Yes, a broad sweeping or budget statement. Sorry. Well, we'll talk about the budget process, but the speech itself. I mean, people, of course, it's a big day. Many people pay attention to it to see what goodies are in it. I suspect there will be more lenses on it this year because we're on the cusp, supposedly, of a potential election. So people want to see if it's an election budget. Tell us how impactful and how important
an election budget, though.
Anyways, that's a good point. But yes, answer that question and then we'll get into the meat of it and the process and how you actually arrive at this point.
Sounds like I need to be the financial secretary today. Morning again, as I said. Daren, I think perhaps what we could do in from the outset is to probably separate the budget statement
from the process
from the budget process, because the budget statement is really a mixture of political posturings and the presentation of the actual government activity. So the statement is layered in it's the report of the administration, the political administration for their term of governance, with the plans for the next year of governance.
Okay.
If in summary, in dollars and mostly cents.
Okay, I got you.
S-E-N-S-E. So.
Or mostly nonsense, depending on
which
side.
Which is why I said mostly sense.
which is depending on which side of the political fence you come on.
So it encapsulates. So, for example, you'll get a layer of the statement, which presents to you the actual summary of the document. Because there's a statement, there's a document of the revenue and expenditure of the government for the previous year. Previous 2 to 3 years, actually, and then the forward projections of the year ahead. I think most people normally get caught up in what is said more than what is given, right? So that is why I wanted to separate the process, because the statement now itself, the presenter, usually the Minister of Finance, to be separated from the Prime Minister. It's just that in this case, it's Prime Minister who's the Minister of Finance, but normally it's the Minister of Finance who's giving a report of mainly two things. One, how the government would have collected and utilized the resources for the year, and two, how the government's fiscal financial policies and programs would have impacted and will continue to impact the economy. In summary.
All right. Broad sweeping answer to a broad sweeping question. So tell us about the process. How do you actually go about constructing a national budget?
So unfair.
Why is that unfair?
Because you have an entire budget office who's responsible for that process.
So just for my friends in the market, right, and those on Market Street that hail me up, Mr. Ward, good program, Mr. Ward, bad question, yeah, so and so. Break it down for them. What goes into the budget process?
In summary, the process involves each ministry, in fact, each department, every department in government, and the statutory authority and so on, because it's an entire government it encompasses.
Okay.
They would all present their financial summary of the year before. They would do a review and assessment, and those go into the budget office, which is the centralized department in the ministry. And of course, they would also be presenting their budget for the period to come. So it starts there. It goes into the ministry. They look at it. They make an attempt to rationalize everything. And I say rationalize because, unfortunately for us in Antigua and Barbuda, we traditionally spend more than we make. So it's the process of rationalization, prioritizing what plans and programs and policies the government would want to undertake. We know payroll is the dominant thing in the budget. Pensions and gratuities, priority things in the budget, and then how they finance the various programs and policies. That then goes to perhaps a select finance committee comprising more technicians and ministers and so on. That goes to cabinet to look at rationalizing it. It will come back down to finance, probably go back out to the ministries with the cuts, the adjustments, the amendments.
There are always cuts.
Yes, there are always cuts. Some people will get more than others, depending on the priority areas. And that process goes on iteratively, repeatedly, until we get to the final position, which then becomes the or the foundation on which the government's expenditure in the nation is built out for the next year, and the framework on which the budget statement is given.
Who determines the priority? Is that the sole prerogative of the Prime Minister or the budget director? Who determines who determines whether education gets more than health, or whether legal affairs gets less than, who makes those determinations? Generally speaking.
What's Mr. Harris's number? Can I take it to the financial secretary? In general terms, though, the policies are set by the cabinet, the political administration. It is then the job of the technical team within the Ministry of Finance to advise, okay, this is what you want, these are the resources we have, this is what is possible. And then the juggling act is almost continuous, because it's always too few resources being chased by a lot of demands. Yeah. Always. It's very rare that we have a surplus.
When was the last time you recall? You're an analyst.
We budgeted. We've had surpluses. I think with the CIP in place, we've done a lot better. In terms of the actual numbers, I can probably send you that, because I tell the people you came last night, so I didn't get to look at that part.
That's right. Well, when people shaft you and say they can't come again, you have to do it.
No, I'm just saying that just because I should be able to give you that specific answer, it's not coming off the top of my head.
No. When we look at headlines like what's in the Daily Observer, all right, where I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at it, so I don't want to be unfair to you.
No, but tell
me.
In
today's Daily Observer, I'll just pull it up very quickly. There was a protest yesterday where workers from the Fines Institute were not very happy at the fact that the overtime pay from 2019 is outstanding.
Workers from Jolly Beach?
No, I didn't say Jolly Beach. Fines Institute.
Yes. Okay, yes.
Where did you hear Jolly Beach,
Sorry.
young lady? All right,
Jolly
you've had
Beach
a long...
is in my head.
Yeah, well, we'll talk a little bit about that. But yes, the workers from Fines Institute were obviously not very happy. They staged a protest outside the Treasury building yesterday, and they're claiming that they are owed overtime since 2019. Now, if we have a budget every year, and we're supposed to have a budget office and all systems in place to make sure that adherence to the budget is implemented, why are we having situations similar to this and similar to this, where you have people who have not been paid for inordinate periods of time? And I'm pretty sure that fines is not the only one.
So to one of my earlier statements, which is that we have few resources chasing a lot of expenditure. So that's where that problem begins.
A lot of expenditure chasing few resources.
Okay, all right. The apple before the cart. But we get it. So when the budgeting process is done, as far as I recall, it might have changed in recent times. Probably unlikely. But so let's use Fines Institute. Fines Institute would have budgeted for, we have X number of staff, we have X number of persons that we need to serve, therefore this is our payroll for the period. That would have gone to finance. Finance may or may not approve that amount.
Okay.
So given all the other needs that are in the system, because remember, Central is dealing with everybody, they could have said to Fines, listen, your budget is going to be, if you wanted 10, we're giving you 950. So Fines then has to make that 950 work for the year. But Fines also knows that in order to make sure that their patrons, their customers, the elderly who are there, are properly served, that people need to work extra hours.
Right.
So they work the extra hours under the presumption that at some point we will be able to pay for these extra hours. The payment for that now becomes an iterative process, because that has to go back into the system, and the system has to find the space to pay the overtime for fines, overtime for customs, the allowance for teachers, allowance for nurses, allowance for the police, the risk allowance for public works officers, boots allowance for, you see I'm beginning to pile on all these other things.
You have
that
piled on all those other things, which do happen in the news ever so often.
Right. So all of those other things are would likely not have been included in the original amounts allocated for that period. But because it's not allocated for, does not mean that the service doesn't need to be done. And so that carries over into the next budget cycle.
But hold on. This amount, according to these workers, all right, these amounts are outstanding since 2019.
And there
so
are probably
would have
some
provision
departments
been
that
made for them, because we've had a budget, we've had at least 2 budgets since that situation. So why weren't provisions made, or were provisions made?
So again, provisions were probably made, but again, somewhere in the system, priority is being made. So for example, provisions were probably made, but then COVID came, and so resources had to be spent for COVID. I'm using it as an example.
Yes, I understand.
Or provisions were made, and then something of significance happened in education, and somebody else determined, listen, we're juggling here, so let's move things around. It's a continuous process of moving things around in order to keep the machine of government and paying people moving, turning over and over. And that would likely have been complicated by the downturn in revenue that we suffered for many months during the COVID lockdown.
The COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact, no doubt. You just referred to it. And you also made reference to the impact of the CIP on government finances. Undoubtedly, I think it's no secret that the CIP has been critical. Is that, the question that many ask, were it not for the CIP, where would we be? And how long will we be in this vulnerable position? Because the argument is the CIP can't last forever, or at least in terms of revenue generation. Or will it last forever? What are your thoughts on that? In terms of our dependence on the CIP, is that a dangerous thing?
I would prefer to look at the CIP in terms of how it has become a part of our revenue process.
Okay. That's fine.
1. 2, the conversation about how we use the CIP funds. And 3, where do we go?
Right.
So first part, folks, like you say, wonder without CIP, where would we be? The reason why the CIP was introduced, and remember, the CIP introduction predates the sitting administration.
Correct.
So there's a general acceptance by all persons who want to run the country that CIP is a critical part of how we generate revenue.
Correct. Although some parties claim they're going to scrap it. At least one party said that they're going to scrap it because they think it's not good, etc. But anyway,
couple $100 million in revenue. Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Annually. So what the question becomes now, because in some countries, CIP is used mainly for capital expenditure. Can we get to the point where we use CIP mainly for capital? That could probably be something that we look at in our overall national planning process, because large amounts of our CIP are part of our recurrent expenditure because of the nature of our revenue intake. Remember,
what do you mean by that?
So our main revenue streams are the ABST, the taxes on companies and profits, property taxes, stamp
RRC.
duties, the revenue recovery tax, custom duties. Those have proven insufficient to carry the burden of our operation expenses, payroll, maintenance of everything.
Okay.
Well, we know our maintenance record, infrastructure development, and all of that. It is not the current tax revenue profile is insufficient. So our non-tax revenue, such as, and if we were to do a profile of how Antigua has developed, back when, maybe in the 80s, maybe early 90s, we had a lot of grant revenue coming in. We had a lot of international aid, USAID, this aid, that aid, all of those have dried up.
Right.
And so as we have moved along in our independence, we have had to become more independent in how we fund ourselves.
Okay.
So the CIP, I think, was very timely in terms of replacing a lot of the aid that we would have gotten, European aid, US aid, and all of those.
Right.
Our main aid now is Chinese aid. And you know the conversations that many people have. So we have to make our minds up. Our economy can only support so much taxes as it is now. And the conversation would come up about the extent of the exemptions. That is a whole other thing that we can go into if you want to quickly. But the bottom line is, if we want to have a conversation about removing CIP, we must have a conversation about what replaces it. And are we, the people, prepared to be the primary carriers of supplying our own needs?
There's so many questions that come out of what you've just said, but I will start with
How much more time
the
we
cost
have?
of
2
government.
minutes?
The cost of government. The argument has been made in the past that government is too large. The government can't afford to hire everybody. The government wage bill is too high. And so, therefore, it's not sustainable. And were it not for CIP, the government may be would have been forced to make hard decisions as far as payroll is concerned. You addressed it. It was the first item on your line item, payroll. Where do you stand on that issue of government being? I mean, I had a contretemps with Max on Monday, where he spoke about government being the main driver of job creation or something along that line. And then I came back on him and said, well, Max, the government cannot afford to hire everybody. And then we had that whole conversation. Is the public sector, in your view, bloated? And is it a situation where we really have to seriously look? Somebody's going to have to bell the cat of reducing the amount of money we're spending on wages.
If someone bells the cat and reduces the size of the of the public service, where do we send those employees? The
theorists will say,
the
give
government.
the private sector room to expand, and they will hire those
Okay,
workers.
fine. So let's address all three, beginning with the public sector and the room to expand. When we say give the public sector room to expand, we have 40 years of Antigua and Barbuda. And if we were to do a comparison in terms of the size of government in Antigua and Barbuda compared to similar size economies, one of the interesting observations, and I challenge persons to do it, is that for many countries, the size of their governments, similar governments, has actually expanded over decades.
Okay.
And that is because, as much as all of us, including me, would love to see the private sector being the lead growth sector, it's just not practical. It's just not practical without us making some very hard structural adjustments. And I'll give you some examples of what I mean.
Yes.
Tourism, prior to COVID, tourism was beginning to pick up in Antigua and Barbuda in terms of us being able to diversify the kinds of services offered to bring more people to the table for employment. There are lots of people in Antigua who don't think that tourism should be the lead driver. There are many persons who say, let's turn to agriculture. Fine. When tourism faltered in Antigua because of COVID, agriculture also faltered significantly. A lot of the large farms that supplied a lot of the hotels, our egg production, our production of fruits and vegetables, and so on, all faltered. And there's data to support what I'm saying. I'm not making this up. Because the hotels and the cruise ships, who brought thousands of persons underground daily, meant thousands more people to eat at the restaurants, potentially, or even hundreds. And so the restaurants would demand agricultural produce. Thousands of visitors in the hotel rooms means that, again, those hotels will demand agricultural products and services, and so the agricultural sector will grow. With the loss of that, it comes down to our fixed population. And so even if we discuss, which is important, diversifying what we put into our agricultural sector, we have to have bodies underground to eat it. Without bodies underground, it can only grow so much. And if we begin to have conversations about exporting it, the cost of production in Antigua for agricultural products is much more significant than a lot of the countries around us. Are they going to buy more expensive goods from us when they can get it from other places cheaper? We can import agricultural products onto ourselves cheaper than we can produce it. We should make the sacrifice to produce it nonetheless. Food safety reasons, food security reasons, quality and so on.
Food import bill reduction, maybe?
I'm saying all of that.
Yes.
So those are factors that we consider. Let's look at other sectors. We're looking at sectors in services, our IT-related platforms and all the technology and so on related platforms. Well, if we go back to construction, what is construction linked to again? Construction would be linked to private home construction, for one.
Right.
I have to pay to get my home built, which means I have to be working somewhere. So where do I work? To generate the revenue, to demand a house, to drive the construction sector. So during COVID, one of the things I know will come out in the budget for sure is that our construction sector has grown tremendously. The data from DCA, for those who wish to, you can check the DCA stats, that will bear that out. While we were sleeping, COVID, the port underwent a significant transformation. So that will be counted in our economic growth. However, most of the construction services provided for the port and for the Chinese embassy, for example, those would all be, when we connect our economic growth data, GDP, to our balance of payments data, those would all be counted against us because there will be outflows. The money came in, built those things, counted towards our GDP, and then the Chinese economy would have benefited in terms of payment for labor and the import of the construction material. See, there's a very interesting connection that we must make through all of this.
Yes.
In the
notice I'm quiet. I'm listening very keenly.
Quite a number of hotels went under construction.
Right.
Quite a number of large homes were all constructed during this period. A number of things were constructed. Yes, they're going to add to our gross domestic product. Excellent. Were enough of our people employed so that that money remains to circulate in the domestic economy? Or is it that it would result in an outflow which would impact our balance of payments? And so, yes, the growth came in, but a lot of the benefits in terms of economic-wise would not be for us.
And that leads into my next question. The finance minister has said... No. Just cool. The finance minister has indicated that growth of 4.2% was realized during the period under review.
Yes.
Now, there has already been a debate. Where is this 4.2%? Who is feeling you feel too? Somebody asked me, because I don't know, people think I don't know. Darren, you feel it to 4.2%? I said,
I'm going to ask you in a different way. You're in the insurance services.
Yes.
Did your overall company success, or the industry, let me not leave it to your company,
because you're not going to answer.
Industry, did your industry realize a net increase or decrease in the demand for insurance services? Because if you realize a net increase in the demand for services, then you are part of the growth.
Okay.
If you did not experience an increase in that, then you're not a part of the growth.
Why does the man on the street, the average person, say, I don't feel no growth? It's only those at the top of the economic food chain feel the growth.
So let's discuss the average man in the street, and if they were not the average person on the street.
Average person.
For me, when I say man in the street, I know I mean me, so I'm good. Okay, but for the average man on the street, if I lost my job, if I were not able to service my mortgage, if I was not able to maintain my car, if I was not able to maintain the lifestyle that I was accustomed to, I would not feel as if I was a part of the growth. However, were my children able to continue with their education? Because somebody had to pay for that.
Right.
Was I able to continue to access health services that I was accustomed to? Somebody had to pay for that. Were you a beneficiary of grants and donors by other people? So I'm coming back to you again. Through your Rotary service, was there an increase in the volume of goods and so on that you were able to distribute during the year. Because if you were able to distribute more food packages, for example, if you were able to give out more $500 vouchers to people across the community, somebody had to give that to you in order for you to be able to give that out.
Correct.
That counts towards our economic circulation of goods and services and money. And so by extension, that counts towards economic growth. We want to break it down to the bottom line. Mamin lib, if me lib, somebody, if I didn't work to live, somebody else had to work for it.
To help you.
Well, then money spent.
I got you.
And that is part, because the economic growth basically looked at the value of goods and services produced and circulated in the economy for the period.
Let me ask you, tomorrow.
And that is not politically sexy, but it's the reality.
I understand. Where do you come down on the utilization of CIP for? Do you think we should use it more for capital or for recurrent expenditure? Short answer, because we only have 3 minutes.
I would prefer capital, but I know that we need it for recurrent.
Do you think we could change that or modulate that to the extent that we could put a little more in law? Because the IMF did criticize that or suggest that, hey, CIP funds should be used for da-da-da-da-da-da-da and not recurrent expenditure. You agree with the IMF?
No.
You don't?
No.
Because you think it's divorced from our reality.
Short answer? The short answer is we need to survive, spend the money so we can survive.
Okay. Last question. Tomorrow's budget statement, what are you looking forward to? What are you going to be looking for? Maybe that's a better way of putting it. What are you going to be looking for?
Besides the entertainment?
Besides the entertainment, Petra. The substance, what are you going to be looking for?
Substantially, I think the 3 main things that I'm looking forward to, for me, I want to see where the government identifies the main areas that grew. I haven't yet gotten all my numbers in, so I think that's where I'll get some of those numbers out. Okay. I'd be looking forward to that. The other thing I would look forward to would be what would be the new policies and programs that are going to be driving us going forward. I would want to know, for example, I hope a statement is made on how our entertainment sector will be going for 2022. I think that is a critical thing that I would want to see coming out of the budget, because entertainment is a key component of our economy.
Entertainment.
Yeah, entertainment, carnival, fetes, all of that. I'm hopeful that the government will use the opportunity of the budget to send a signal for that.
Okay.
What
about workers who haven't been paid? Liat, for example, or Bojali Beach, or other workers who have been long suffering, not been paid. Do you think there's going to be something in there for them, especially considering we might be heading into an election?
Something that the workers can actually hold on to. For their sake, I hope so. I know I'm not expecting it.
You're not.
I won't be surprised if it comes, because it's a political budget. The thing is, for me, I think too often we make too many statements about private sector things that are really not germane to the budget, as in, because remember, the budget is focused on government's impact on the economy and the whole, how the government does its business. So that is what I would prefer to see. For example, with Liat, Liat is critical. I understand that Liat is critical, but Liat is technically a private operations that the government would then siphon money into, so that
Liat wasn't owned by shareholder governments, Barbados.
Yes, but it's run as something separate to government's budget.
Yeah, okay.
The government will put something in it, but it's not a part of our budget.
Petra, no good deed goes unpunished. The budget statement will be presented tomorrow in the House of Parliament.
Goes unpunished.
Right, so therefore we're going to have a post-budget conversation.